The failures of this bloody government scream to the sky. The fact that she does not make the release of the abductees her main goal is inexcusable. This is what the government looks like when it cares about national honor and not about its citizens. Something I've said already. Anyone who wants to live understands that first and foremost, all abductees must be returned now because the window of opportunity is closing. About 20,000 people have already joined the demand to release all the abductees now. This is from Omdim Beyachad. It's also just kind of common sense that Hamas would want to remind the world that their hostages aren't already dead like some in Israel believe. Yes. This is the truth in this circumstance. The truth in this circumstance is one that, as far as I understand, Israeli officials do not want out there. So much so that saying things like this or covering things like this could be considered in violation of the current law under the new war coalition government, the war government. The Khan public broadcaster reports that Israeli PR experts are calling the decision to put Lifshitz in front of cameras a mistake. This is from Times of Israel. The Khan public, I'm going to read this again. Criticism is pouring in after freed hostage Yocheved Lifshitz appeared to praise her Hamas captors and criticize Israel at a press conference earlier in the day. This is from Times of Israel. The Khan public broadcaster reports that Israeli PR experts are calling the decision to put Lifshitz in front of cameras a mistake. The station knows that the international media is now reporting on Hamas's kindness in taking care of the hostages' needs. In Israel Hayom, columnist Eddie Rothstein calls the interview a propaganda win for Hamas. What a brave and enlightened woman, the kind we thought they no longer make in Israel. And what a clumsy handling of the event, he writes. The truth is, you don't need to be a PR expert to know you can't have a press conference like this live on television. There's no doubt the Lifshitz statements could have been managed better, tweets Channel 12 reporter Daphne Liel, who adds her descriptions were still pretty shocking. Anyone sane should understand that medical attention she was given was intended to keep their bargaining chips alive and not from the kindness of their hearts. The channel's Dana Weiss calls the press conference a disaster, noting the lack of state intervention in managing her appearances. I think this is important to understand. That is important to understand. Why is this important to understand? What Daphne Liel is saying. It's not at the kindness of their hearts, but simply out of their interest, their self-interest in survival, that Hamas is offering medical attention. This is something that I have mentioned as well. Okay? But when I would mention this, many people in the chat would yell at me. So maybe when you hear someone who is reactionary have that same opinion inside of Israel proper, maybe you will also recognize this. Because it goes against the idea that these guys simply are there to do death and murder and are not operating out of their own self-interest in continuing their survival. The hostage taking in this circumstance is a cruel act. That much is true. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. But what you have to recognize is that there is a reason for it. There is a reason. This does not mean a justification, but to immediately hand wave away that plays into the narrative that Israel wants to put forward, which is that these guys took them to rape them and kill them. And they're going to go and kill them quietly, not in front of a camera. They're not going to use the hostages as a bargaining chip, but instead, they're just there to just like do brutality to them. It is already a brutal act to take someone as a hostage, but dead hostages are worth nothing to Hamas. Alive hostages that are well taken care of are worth everything to not only Hamas, but other Palestinian forces as well. Okay? The channel Dana Weiss calls the press conference a disaster, noting the lack of state intervention in managing her appearances. Toll's Tal Schneider takes aim at the hospital spokesperson who put Lifshitz in front of the cameras rather than just her family members, and then bragged about his ability to get a wow factor for journalists on Instagram. From a professional point of view, this is an embarrassment for the hospital, she writes on X. They are more mad. They're mad that this 85-year-old woman was able to accurately portray her experiences. That fucking blows my mind. If she had come out, if she had personally come out and been like, they were brutal, I would still cover it. Because there is no reason for me to believe that she is lying in that circumstance. especially considering that she has her husband in captivity still. But because she gives a more balanced assessment of her conditions, everyone turns around and says, oh, well, she must be lying for one reason or another. And her balanced assessment also. How can you say it's accurate? We don't know that at all. This is insane to me. It is insane to me that you are like now talking about an 85-year-old grandma who was fucking held captive by Hamas as like an agent or something. Like she has an ulterior motive in this circumstance. The ulterior motive is that she's afraid that they will murder her husband ruthlessly. I know her husband is a prisoner. But if that was the case, then she would have no reason to say that what happened to the kibbutz was a slaughter, or that she was hit on her way into Gaza. Please, you said source to a first-hand account. Here, Yoshevet Lifshitz, a frail 85-year-old grandmother who was one of the two hostages released by Hamas on Monday, recounted the moment that militants snatched her from her home in Kibbutz near Oz and drove away on a motorbike towards Gaza, a painful act during which she said she was beaten and sustained bruises. Lifshitz says she was forced to walk on wet ground and descended into an underground tunnel system she likened to a spider web, where she was greeted by people who told us, we believe in the Quran, and promised not to harm her and her fellow hostages. This is an experience that almost virtually every single Israeli citizen that has spent any time with Hamas militants that wasn't ruthlessly slaughtered by them, by the way. So I just make no mistake, I'm not making light of the situation at all or trying to cover it without accuracy. But this is something that I've heard from other hostages as well. They have all told the same thing, that first and foremost, they were like, we're not going to hurt you. We're not here to hurt you, which, of course, doesn't matter because they did hurt people, okay? They did. But every single person that has been like, these Hamas terrorists, they slaughtered my family, also told me they believe in the Quran and promise not to harm me or the other fellow hostages. There's no reason for people to offer that if it's factually inaccurate, especially when it's paired up with people saying that they had ruthlessly slaughtered their friends. Lifshit's daughter Sharon, who helped her convey her mother's comments to reporters outside of a hospital in Tel Aviv on Tuesday, called it a huge network of tunnels. She was initially grouped together with 25 other people. We already talked about that. They really took care of the sanitary side of things, so we didn't get sick, Lifshitz added. Each of the 5 hostages in her group received their own doctor, and there was a paramedic present who supervised medication. They were very generous to us, very kind. They kept us clean, Lifshitz said. They took care of every detail. There are a lot of women, and they know about feminine hygiene, and they took care of everything there. Lifshitz also accused the Israel Defense Forces and Shin Bet Intelligence Service of not taking threats from Hamas seriously, and said the costly Gaza border fence erected by Israel had done nothing to protect their community from the Hamas attack. Why would she say this? Do you think that this is also a part of her propaganda? Do you think Hamas was like saying, like, you have to say something that every other person whose entire fucking family was slaughtered from other kibbutzim have said? You have to repeat that line that people that are in the Dead Sea right now, that are not literally apprehended, that have no friends that are apprehended, that have had their entire family slaughtered by Hamas, has said the exact same thing. The lack of awareness by Shin Bet and the IDF hurt us a lot, she stressed. They warned us 3 weeks beforehand. They burned fields. They sent fire balloons, and the IDF did not treat us seriously. Lifshitz explained how this culminated in the attack on Nir Oz in the southern Israel border on October 7th. All of a sudden, on a Saturday morning, everything was very quiet. There was hard pounding on the settlement. Not long after, hordes of Hamas fighters broke through the kibbutz's expensive fences and kept coming in their droves, she said. It was very, very difficult and unpleasant. As she concluded her remarks, Sharon said her mother's feeling was that the story is not over until everybody comes back. Hamas released Lifshitz and her neighbor and friend Nurit Cooper, 79, on Monday, and later they were reunited with family members who rushed to the bedside at Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. Grandson Daniel, who heard of her release while staying at a hotel in Eilat with other evacuees from near Oz, said Monday that the news of the women's release sent a jolt of joy through the hotel and hope that others may be freed soon. And right now, the commentary on the pro-Israeli side is that Hamas is using the hostages as a way to stop the bombing campaign for 6 hours at a time. As though the bombing campaign has to continue. There's no way to do a ceasefire. There's no way to do anything other than continuously kill children inside of Gaza. And Hamas is using the hostage negotiations and slowly but surely trickling out hostages as a way to stall and cease the bombing campaigns. And they're reporting on this as though, sorry, these hostages have to die. There's nothing we can do about it because they have to literally fucking keep bombing. If you want to understand the perspective a little bit further, here is former Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Wanted to cover that for you as well. Wanted to give you the full length of that, full length of his statements. Let me see. Where the fuck did it go? Jesus Christ, I lost it. To understand it better, Lifshitz press conference panned as a disastrous for Israel PR win for Hamas. Okay? Where is it? Oh, here it is.
In the 13th day of this war, which was forced upon us, which we didn't want, which we have no choice but to win. Not because we seek revenge, but because we can't live like this. Last week I went to visit the people who were evacuated from Kfar Aza. At the entrance I met an elderly lady that I know, and she said to me, they killed my son, but at least I have cancer and I will die soon enough. I will not have to feel what I feel anymore. I met a 13-year-old girl who saw the murder of her best friend. I met a father whose wife and 2 children were abducted, sits alone in an empty apartment. I met people with hollow eyes who described to me what burned babies look like. The terrorists abducted a particularly large number of young women. We're trying not to think why, but we can't. I want to remind you, the horrors of October the 7th has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The terrorists.
Yeah, he's like, it's isolated, it's separate, it's like it's completely unrelated. Don't ever say that it was not in a vacuum. Say that it was in a vacuum. Say that it was in a vacuum. Say that it was in a vacuum. It's isolated. It's isolated. Why is he saying that? Well, the reason why he's saying that is because he wants to say that this is an unprompted attack. Okay, that's his goal. His goal is to say this is unprompted, unprovoked, and while it is unprecedented, it is not unprovoked and it is not unprompted. This is not a justification, okay? But to act like this is an isolated instance is a lie. Is a lie that he is telling you, okay? That's it.
Are not part of the struggle for a Palestinian state. Hamas don't care about that. Just like...
That's okay, dude. Yeah. Yeah, dude, totally.
ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they don't want any agreement with anyone. They want to kill Jews because they are Jews, and Christians because they are Christians, and moderate Muslims because they are moderate. They killed...
Bro, this is a wild thing to say, considering that, like, Once again, it's always pure projection. It's always pure projection. Swap it with Hamas and Israel, and you arrive at the Israeli position as well. Straight up.
260 young people who went to a music festival because Hamas don't like music, they only love death and bloodshed. It is interesting and shocking how quickly the world has moved on. Israel was giving barely a week of sympathy and global shock.
So many Jews, both in Israel and also in America, have said that Israel's immediate actions, while there were still militants inside of Israeli borders, were to bomb Gaza, that Israel did not offer them a time of peace and mourning, that they immediately turned around and used this as a justification for their violent retribution that collectively punished all Palestinians. The idea that the world forgot about the Israeli victims is false. They shouldn't, and they have not. Okay? But if there's one person, or if there's one group of individuals that are responsible for people immediately moving in the other direction and going, what the fuck are you doing? You have to stop. Please do a ceasefire, was Israel's own actions in the immediate aftermath. You cannot retaliate by killing 2,000 children and cutting off their food, cutting off their water, cutting off their power, and then assume that the rest of the world, after 14, 15, 16, 17 days of a brutal siege, that they're not going to respond to that. And the reality is, the Israeli government knows this as well. That's why they say Pallywood. That's why they say Palestinians are telegenically dead children. That's why they say Palestinians engage in the act of human shields. That they put their children in the vicinity of our rockets that are just, our missiles that only fire on targets, that happen to kill children because the horrible Hamas militants have placed those children in the way of our rocket fire, in the way of our missiles, in the way of our shelling campaigns. This only works if you do not recognize that 2.2 million people are living inside of an open-air prison, a concentration camp, one of the most densely packed areas on the fucking planet. If you don't recognize that, then you think, oh yeah, well, I don't know, maybe they are doing that. This only works if you think simultaneously, if you don't know how densely packed Gaza is, a civilian population, 50% of which are children. If you don't actually think that Palestinians are human beings, if you don't think that they're human beings, and you are completely oblivious to their living conditions even before this last siege, you don't understand it. You will go along with this narrative. Okay? The largest hospital in Gaza, the Indonesian hospital, was out of power last night. Yesterday, 24 hours ago, they lost power. Israel refuses to give them fuel for their generators. There are babies in incubators in this hospital alongside other hospitals. They cannot evacuate. There's no way to do that. That's why it's considered a fucking war crime. Doesn't Hamas have like 500,000 liters of fuel they are withholding from the civilians? Maybe in your fucking fantasies they do. Even the IDF spokesperson said Hamas has 1,000 liters of fuel that they're withholding from the civilians. No one said 500,000. You made that up. Even the IDF spokesperson said 1,000 liters of fuel being withheld from Palestinian civilians. Now that went from 1,000 liters of fuel to 500,000 liters of fuel. New IDF tweet says 500,000. Nice. Just like the inflation has struck the 9/11, where the original assessment was this is Israel 9/11 times 15. Now Bibi Netanyahu is saying this is Israel's 9/11 times 20. The liters of fuel that Palestinians actually have is not 1,000 liters, but 500,000 liters of fuel. The aerial photographs seem to indicate it's around 500,000. No, dude, they actually have oil refineries, okay? They have oil refineries with 1 million liters of fuel. They have a pipeline directly tapped to Iranian refineries. Believe me, bro. Aerial photographs, bro. Look at these empty tanks, bro. Yeah. They also literally have water too. They have all of it. It's just, this is no different. This is no different than saying that the situation inside of Gaza is actually far better than the way that people suggest it is. People claiming that they have luxury hotels inside of the Gaza Strip, and that people are living in the lap of luxury from the billions of dollars they get from UNRWA.
And then the word went back to attacking us for defending ourselves. I've got one question to you all. And that question is really the reason we're here. Do you think an organization which has no problem butchering babies, butchering pregnant women,
Yeah, Israeli government.
and butchering a 13-year-old autistic girl with an 80-year-old grandmother has any problem lying? Of all the distortions of the press coverage of the past days, the worst one is the balance. A large part of the media is offering its readers and viewers a balanced picture. They are presenting both sides equally. The story told by a democratic country that is trying to protect life.
You cannot be a democracy while maintaining an apartheid. Can't. It's not a democracy. It's an apartheid regime. So, pick a struggle there. You're not a democracy.
And the story told by a murderous terror organization that hates life.
What's wild to me is that, the closest to what he presents is, not even my broadcast, because I condemn Hamas regularly, okay? I do my daily condemnation of Hamas multiple times throughout the day. And even then, it's I don't think he's watching the top of the hour ad break. You know what I mean? I don't think that Yair Lapid is in here being this guy Hasan, he's the one who's covering the other side's perspective, which is really fucked up. And then he serves me a 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour. And then tells me that if I no longer want to see the fucking ads, all I need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with the Twitch Prime by connecting my Amazon Prime account to my Twitch account, or by getting gifted a sub if I'm lucky. It's really fucked up. Calm like a Tom, thank you for the 10 gifted subs, including giving one to Prime Minister Yair, former Prime Minister Yair Lapid. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. How come no one calls them out on these blatant lies when it comes to intel when they switch it up so drastically? How come nobody asks how it went from 1,000 liters to 500K liters? Because in the Western world, we are conditioned into believing our allies, which is a developed state, over militants. Okay? This is a constant struggle, even for Kurdish militias that operate alongside the CIA and operate alongside the fucking State Department. Americans are conditioned into looking at even our allies that are militant groups, right? Like Kurdish militias in Rojava, and assuming that they're fucking terrorists because they're brown. They're brown and they speak a language that they don't understand, and they look exactly like the other people that we are conditioned into fucking ruthlessly slaughtering. Okay? So you cannot go and explain to people that, like, these guys are our allies, actually. They're good. They're the good guys. Please don't get mad at them. Okay? Do you understand? That's why there will never be a collective moment of breathing room and a tempered reaction to any kind of brown militant group, regardless of whether or not they are considered terrorists by the American State Department, which is, of course, a political designation to begin with. This does not mean that Hamas is not Islamist fundamentalists. They are. Okay? Islamic Jihad even more so. But Americans and Westerners in general are conditioned into thinking any kind of militia that is not a well-developed state, okay? Any kind of brown person across the board, already scary. A militia on top of that, doesn't matter if they are literally being trained by the CIA, doesn't matter if they're literally working alongside the American State Department at the behest of their interests. No matter what, in the post-9/11 world, brown militia bad, okay? Now, HasanAbi actually brought up a good point. He said, Mujahideen being an exception to the rule. No, that's why I'm saying post-9/11. Post-9/11, America engaged in a information war to manufacture as much consent as physically possible for America's gross war on terror, which killed millions of people, destabilized tens of millions, created a massive refugee crisis, created a power vacuum in the Middle East that created like super violent Islamist cells that they also facilitated and funded and offered logistical capabilities to originally. That even they escorted out of certain areas. You understand? People do not have the capacity to go, well, these are people that have a self-interest. Acts that I might not agree with, but still operating under you know, a self-interested perspective. No, it's just wanton violence. There's good people and there's bad people. Marvel Cinematic Universe politics. Good people do good things. Israel is our ally. They're good people. They're always good doing good things, even though sometimes doing good things become complicated and you have to kill 2,000 plus children, okay? But it's still at the behest of a good cause. And bad people only do bad things because they're bad. There's no way to assess the situation beyond my enemies are ontologically evil, and therefore no amount of evil that we do to them is unjustifiable. I do not make such assessments when talking about Israel. I might be hypercritical of Israel, but of course, I do not make the assessment across the board that like every Israeli is violent and a criminal and wrong. Okay? Just like I do not make such monolithic assessments on Palestinians in general.
Hamas lies as a policy. They murder our children and then they blame us. They murder their own children and then blames us. They use people as human shields, fire at them if they try to escape, and cover for this with violence.
Like, by all accounts, every single account that has covered the human shield narrative that Israel adopts on a regular basis will always maintain the position that in the overwhelming majority of strikes that Israel engages in, where they kill people, okay, where they kill children, where they kill women, that they are killed as a consequence of how densely packed Gaza is. Even the most critical assessment that is critical to Palestinians and critical to Hamas. Stop using Islamophobic language. I'm losing my mind. Okay. I'm going to move on from this. Even accurate accounts from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, which are no friends to Palestinians across the board, it took them, to be fair, you say you are against Islamism? Yeah, of course, because I understand the conditions in which governments that are fundamentalist are established, okay? That's why. I understand that. I do not think that it is good for a fundamentalist government to control any area. Okay? It does not matter if they are Muslim. It does not matter if they are Jewish. It does not matter if they are Christian. It's still conservatism. In this circumstance, however, you have to understand how this fundamentalism thrives and is considered an emancipatory force. I'm not doing the classic like, oh, both sides are bad and here is why and yada yada yada. I'm trying to explain the conditions that lead to the development of a group that takes on arms and engages in violent retaliatory, violent emancipatory acts that I would consider to be unjustifiable, okay? And how over the course of 30, 40 fucking years, 30 plus years, that Hamas went from being a fundamentalist, conservative charity that was marginal and completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things to the governing body of Gaza that became the only group in the eyes of Israel and in the eyes of Palestinians as well to be the governing body that is to be negotiated with, like the actual force that Israel wants to negotiate with. And that was by design. You have to look at the situation and the history to understand that. But if you think that I would be comfortable in a free Palestinian governance that has autonomy, with that free Palestinian governance being fundamentalist, you're wrong. Obviously, we can never consider that because there's never been a moment where there wasn't an occupation that is brutal. Okay? I talked about this before. Earlier today on my Instagram, I covered this because there's like classic people always shitting on like, oh, queers for Palestine. Okay, lol, more like chickens for KFC. I said, here, I'll just show you the Instagram post real quick. People love dunking on this because they can't comprehend empathizing with others on non-ideological boundaries. Queer Palestinians exist. They're under greater threat of an occupation and apartheid regime bombing them. Imperialism and settler colonialism also legitimizes reactionary movements, as it did in Iran. It emboldens them as emancipatory forces. When people struggle against imperialism and settler colonialism, they do not have the liberty and the time to fight for their individual civil liberties. They can't fight for their own civil rights because they're too busy trying to stop being bombed. when bombs are fucking raining on your head, you do not think, oh, well, I do not like that this government that I'm existing under is homophobic. You know what I mean? That's not a concern. That's a secondary concern. Yeah, because see, like, look at this fucking idiot. He went, well, Hamas is so tolerant of the LGBT. It does not matter. You want to know who's also intolerant of the LGBT? Even domestically, okay? The United States of America, Israel. But guess what? There's varying degrees of intolerance. But let me tell you something. You know what ultimately is the least tolerant thing you can do to a gay Palestinian? Drop a fucking bomb on his house and kill his mother, father, and brothers and sisters alongside him. Okay? Shut the fuck up. Average Zionist does not know that gay marriage is illegal in Israel. You know what's also not tolerant of gay Palestinians? Israeli security forces finding who's gay and who's not gay, like queer Palestinians, and blackmailing them to use them as CIs to further their surveillance. Do you feel like that is something that a tolerant force would do, a tolerant force for good? You can turn around and say, wow, well, guess what? It wouldn't even work if they were more tolerant. Sure. But these people have never had a moment to breathe so that they could work in this act of civil liberty. People now dunking on this tweet, but I think that's the point. The point stands fine. Unless you want to firebomb a homophobic evangelical family homeschooling their kid, talking about the homophobia of Palestine is incoherent and raises gibberish. This is especially obvious when you realize that the group making this point about Palestinian homophobia are the people who would wish to enact homophobic policy. It's a fake hypocrisy, and I'm surprised to see seemingly good faith people occasionally going for it. Palestine doesn't support the LGBTQ community. I'm about to tell you something about the United States that's going to blow your mind. What do I always say? Conservatives fucking hate conservatism in other countries. People like Ben Shapiro will unironically use this argument, which is mind-boggling to me. Why are you supporting the attackers? You have made this assessment. Why have you made this assessment? You put that puzzle piece together. Why did you put that puzzle piece together? Because in your mind, you understand that one side's actions are also immoral. And this is the first time you are coming to that recognition. So all of a sudden you go, wait, what do you mean? Is this justified? Is there justification for this? You made that assessment. I never said it's justified. I think it's unjustified. I said it time and time again. Just ban and move on. They want a clip. The Palestinian cause is a left-wing issue in the West, but Palestinians are very conservative. Aside from this being grossly oversimplified and dishonest framing, it's useful to point out these glib, chauvinist mercenaries cannot possibly compute a non-transactional model of human solidarity. Exactly. I'll give you an example from domestic politics that you will understand if you are living in the United States of America, or if you are living, okay? If you're living in the United States of America, or if you are living in the Western world, I always talk about universal health care. Okay? Universal health care does not mean health care for only the people I like. Universal health care means health care for all, which includes people I don't like, which includes evil people, which includes people that I think would better serve a prison sentence than breathe the free man's air. It means for all, including even Nazis, okay? Ridiculous. Does this mean that I like Nazis? Of course not. They've made my life a living hell for the past 10 fucking years. And beyond that, they are gross and abhorrent, obviously, and idiotic. But that does not change the reality that The goal is, no, I'm not taking a moral high ground. This is not taking the moral high ground. My friend, you are wrong. You have to understand, this is self-interest. I am not taking the moral high ground when I say Medicare for all means all, including those who I disagree with, including those who are brutal and barbaric. Why do I say this? It's not the moral high ground at all. It's actually a means of self-interest. I am self-interested when I say Medicare for all. Why? Because as long as you solve the underlying material inequalities, you make it much harder for people to have reactionary points of view. That's it. That's it. Do you think that American Christian militias are not just as fundamentalist as the ISIS right-wing brigades are? The Islamic fundamentalists are? They are. Why do they not fucking go around and slaughter every single person that they consider to be unchristian-like? Do you want to know why? Because they're too busy eating fucking jalapeno poppers at Applebee's. Because they're too fucking fat. Okay? That's why. Because their conditions are not living hell. Now, of course, the more we make these conditions living hell, the more people are aware of the inherent contradictions, the worse their actions will get, the more violent their actions will get. That's the difference between our religious fundamentalists and religious fundamentalists overseas. Now, are there still stochastic terrorists across the board? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's few and far between in comparison to organized militias. And the major difference there is not that some are barbaric and Arabic and scary and Muslim. The major difference there is their material conditions. Okay? Fix people's real human problems, and they will be infinitely less likely to become violent, right-wing, fundamentalist terrorists who will act out on their violent desires, on their violent ideologies. Okay? That's it. So advocating for Palestinian liberation is also the same thing. This is not simply a moral high ground that I'm taking, even though I do believe that I have the moral high ground in this situation. I do think that ethnic cleansing is bad. Brave take, I know. But the reason why I say this is a matter of self-interest, because peace is the only way to create permanent security for not only Palestinians, but also Israelis as well. This is a fundamental reality that many of those people that were inside of the kibbutzes that watched their friends get murdered, they recognize that reality. So why can't you? You can't recognize that reality 10,000 miles away. They can. And they were on the receiving end of a barrel of a fucking gun not that long ago. So if they can demonstrate that moral clarity, so should you. The only way to offer a permanent security measure for everyone living in that region is through peace. Anyone who tells you otherwise is wrong. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar. Anyone who tells you otherwise has a secondary interest, whether it be additional land grabs or whether it be the ethnic displacement and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from that area. That's it. Fuck. This old 85-year-old lady who was literally kidnapped by Hamas recognizes that reality, but many here in the Western world who are far removed from the violence do not. Because they have no personal stake in the matter for the most part. Their interest is just simply watching it on Reddit. Like it's a movie that they're watching with good guys and bad guys. One thing I will say is the quicker you recognize that Israel cares more about killing and forcibly displacing Palestinians than they do about the security of Israelis, the easier you can comprehend the situation on hand. Okay? They care more about killing Palestinians than they do about offering permanent security assurances to their own citizens. This plays out in its domestic policy, and this plays out in its policy against Palestinians in general. Understand this, because it is the truth.
Okay, let's go. With a handshake and a goodbye to her Hamas captors.
I have to pee. I'll be back.
Yocheved Lifshitz and Nurit Cooper crossed the border into Egypt after 17 days held hostage in Gaza. They were taken back to safety in Israel by the International Red Cross. This morning at the hospital in Tel Aviv, where they're recovering, 85-year-old Yocheved told her story.
My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her heart on another side. That she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her. And that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks.
There were people there who took care of all the needs. We can say that to their credit. And they made sure that we will be clean and eat.
Yocheved's husband, Oded, is still being kept hostage. She said that they were split up and held separately in Gaza.
Our hopes from our father and for all the hostages is that they will come home safely.
Israel's military says it is prepared for a ground invasion and just awaiting the orders to go. But there are reports that the US doesn't agree that they are ready yet. Language from some parts of the Israeli government.
I think the real reason why the U.S. says they're not ready yet is because they have to mobilize more troops to ensure that if there is a second front war that opens up either from Lebanon or from Syria or, God forbid, Iran, that they are adequately prepared for it. That's it. They want to flex their military might in the region as best as they possibly can to intimidate other regional powers, to ensure that they do not actually go in and open up a 2-front, 3-front war for Israel, which would be incredibly damaging. I'm afraid, and I hope that this is not the case. Also, I can't watch the Piers Morgan interview. I'm sorry. Late Cuba, can you explain what the formation of Hamas was by design? You were explaining how the formation of Islamist fundamentalist groups was inevitable. Because religion is a tool of organizing. And if your material conditions are horrifying, okay, then obviously people are going to find themselves under the banner of a group of individuals that they might not even ideologically agree with. We never even finished the Yair Lapid speech. Holy shit.
Vast amount of fake news. There has never been a more cynical and horrific abuse of freedom of speech. My argument is that the media can't just claim to bring both sides of the story. If you do that, you are only bringing one, Hamas' side. That's cowardly and it's lazy.
Yeah, you can't bring both sides of the story because then you humanize Hamas, is what he's saying.
It's an insult.
Which is the reality is you're not even humanizing Hamas, you're humanizing Palestinians, and that's what he's afraid of.
Insult to the victims, including the Palestinian victims. It's also an insult to the core idea of what journalism is. Believe me, I know I was a journalist for 31 years. I have no problem with criticism of Israel. But when you know that one side lies and one side makes every effort to verify the facts.
That's insane. To say that is insane, okay? Here, how Israel lies about literally everything from GDF. I hope that there isn't a lot of death on this because I want to show this. I want you to understand something, okay? The IDF does not have a strong track record of being truthful. No state does. America certainly doesn't either, okay? Make no mistake. This is not just simply about the IDF. This is about most states, okay? Most state departments are not going to give you an accurate assessment on the ground because guess what? They're trying to do propaganda. They are trying to do biased propaganda that features misinformation, okay? That's it. Just so you understand. But if you are wondering how that works, well, here, let's take a look at this video.
News out of the Middle East.
Have you noticed something?
Breaking news out of the Middle East. Israeli Defense Forces say
the Israeli military says Hamas.
As Israel says it targeted tunnels and weapons manufacturing sites.
Israel says.
We spoke with the international spokesperson from the IDF, Richard Hecht.
Israeli authorities say.
The Israelis say.
Israel says.
Israel's defense forces saying.
Israel saying.
That's according to the Israeli military.
Israel says. Every single time. But over in Israel, prominent journalists stopped believing the military years ago. Back in 2015, Gideon Levy would write a scathing article in the Israeli Haaretz saying, quote, "The policy of denial and disconnection from reality is rising to a dangerous level, and the illness is getting worse. Israel further entrenches itself in its imaginary reality. It's all just a matter of hasbara, the Israeli euphemism for propaganda." Now, the term hasbara has its nuances. Hasbara is one of those wacky Israeli words that defy translation, but as senior Haaretz correspondent Anshel Pfeffer maintains, hasbara is simply the act or profession of explaining. Even going so far as to say, hasbara is now one of the basic tenets of 21st century Zionism. Indeed, many Israeli media outlets and think tanks are comfortable with this official-sounding interpretation. And in fact, hasbara is a fully codified institution.
Sufi Masoudi, I'm sorry, you are wrong. You talk about the mistakes of the Soviet Union, but what I'm trying to tell you is you are making the same mistakes. No, you are absolutely wrong. If you think that the overwhelming majority of Palestinians were not more comfortable with secular formations, you're wrong. The only reason why they moved against secular organization, away from secular organizations to Hamas is because, one, their leaders were executed, or their leaders were routinely, and even to this day, shown to be patsies for the Israeli government. That was by design, okay? What I'm talking about is not necessarily a forcible secularization of Palestinian peoples or ensuring that Palestinians should not be allowed, forcing Palestinians to not be able to believe in whatever they want to believe and forcing them to be under this, French-style secular democracy, okay, where they can't be fucking Muslim. What I'm simply stating is that if you think that Hamas gained prominence specifically because of their them being Muslim or them being more fundamentalist or them being Islamist, okay, you're wrong. They ran an anti-corruption campaign at a time when the secular forces were understandably viewed by Palestinians, at least not the same amount of Palestinians back then, but at least at least a decent number of Palestinians, a plurality of Palestinians, saw secular Palestinian formations as patsies for the United States government and also for Israel. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, well, I don't want to argue with you on this. How do you think Muslims want Islam to rule? Wait, how you don't think Muslims want Islam to rule? How? That's such a funny fucking take, man. That's a funny take. How would I think? Why would I think that? Just literally, just think about it. Well, I mean, here, I'll clue you in on it. My name is Hasan, okay? So just like think about that for a second. Maybe you can figure it out, okay? I wanted to see what he was going to say. Yeah.
Within the Israeli government.
Show me one Muslim that doesn't want Islam to rule. You can't. Exactly. I can't find a single Muslim. Oh boy, where would I ever be able to find a single Muslim? Now, Islamic rule is not the same across the board. Now, I know you're joking. I know you're joking. I know you're joking, real despot. I know you're joking. I'll give you the example of Israel. Do you think Israelis want, do you think there is a broad majority of Israelis that are championing a far-right religious theocratic governance? Or do you think they protested against that? Now, obviously, they don't realize that you can't just refuse to recognize the existence of an apartheid and then continue to say, oh, well, on the domestic front, we actually disagree. No, that's not correct. No, Israelis do not want a fucking theocratic governance at all. You are so wrong. 80% of Israelis support gay marriage. What the fuck are you talking about? No, there is certainly a sizable amount of the population, but that's how Netanyahu was able to build a coalition. If that was the case, if this wasn't a necessary coalition building with further right-wing elements within the country, then there would be no need for a coalition. Likud in and of itself, or even the more right-wing elements in Israel in and of themselves would be able to maintain majority rule. You guys are wrong. Although Israeli politics is very right-wing, and every Israeli will tell you that if they are honest about it, okay? Israeli politics is Israeli politics is a dance between right-wingers, center right-wingers, and far right-wingers, and even further right-wingers, okay? With like 8 people that are, center-left or maybe leftist. And they are not represented by a broad majority of voters either, okay? That still does not change the reality. That still does not change the reality that, like, across the board, they might be right-wing on certain issues, like the maintenance of the apartheid state or how violent you must be to Palestinians. When it comes down to their own personal day-to-day existence, a lot of Israelis are secular. The problem is that secular Israelis do not comprehend that their government is utilizing the maintenance of an apartheid regime as a means to erode democratic process, as a means to destroy any semblance of Israel being a liberal democracy. And of course, you cannot be a liberal democracy when you have an apartheid state to begin with. Okay? Anyway, let's continue with this video.
After the 2006 Lebanon War, the so-called Hezbollah apparatus underwent a massive overhaul, which included the creation of a government office dedicated solely to Hezbollah, the National Hezbollah headquarters within the office of the Prime Minister. Its many arms extend to the Foreign Ministry, the Ministry...
Yeah, for the record, this is why, like, when you go, oh, why the fuck is Reddit so pro-Israel or whatever, like, brother...